Good evening to you and your viewers. Thank you so much.
Now, I've been, of course, very slowly looking at what this ivermectin is, and I will not profess to know exactly what it is, but I believe it is a drug used to deal with parasitic infections. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, when we deal with infectious diseases, we deal with different types of infections and agents. So you'll have viruses, you have bacteria, then you have parasites, you've got fungi, and so forth. So parasites are just one of those types of infections like lice, scabies, and worms and tapeworms, so forth, that would often require a specific drug that is targeted at that type of agent. So you'll have an antibacterial, you'll have an antivirus, then you'll have an antiparasitic. Those are the drugs that are designed to target a particular kind of agent for treatment.
Now, this particular drug has been tested in a test tube, might I add, and has proven to be effective in as far as blocking the things that would get into the nucleus of the cells that would be brought in by this COVID-19 virus. There are some institutions, I'm not sure here in South Africa, but elsewhere in the world, who are using this, however, not approved, but they're using it nonetheless effectively. And they seem to have gathered, in the interim, some body of evidence that it is effective. What is your view on that?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly you've done your research, but certainly I think what has been found in terms of the laboratory research is that ivermectin seems to have the ability to basically disrupt the way the virus uses certain proteins in order to get into cells. So there are all these proteins that the virus needs to transport itself into cells, and it looks like ivermectin is able to disrupt that process. So because of that, it's not necessarily purposed currently for that purpose. It's designed specifically for antiparasitic, but it's found to have these properties that seems to be effective against the virus. And for me, that was my big question, to say, actually, what is the mechanism of action in terms of how ivermectin is able to basically interfere with the pathway for the virus, because it's not, I didn't understand it, I didn't know it, it's not registered as an antiviral, but now it's almost like we want to shift it from being an antiparasitic to an antiviral. Now, for me, on the one hand, I'm a medical person, but I'm also a scientist. And so I'm very much interested in the data that is emerging. I'm open to the data that is emerging, but I also, as a medical person, have to respect the regulations that are there. I think that for me at the moment, ivermectin is still a scientific exploration rather than an already repurposed drug for use with patients.
But I mean, with that kind of information and the kind of evidence that has been gathered so far, does that make a case for SAHPRA to review this particular drug and have this conversation?
Yeah, no, it does make a case for SAHPRA to look at the evidence, not necessarily to repurpose it, because what you're referring to when you're saying review, you are saying that can SAHPRA basically register ivermectin for use as an antiviral or for specifically for COVID-19. So for that purpose, SAHPRA needs to be able to look at the evidence and say, we are not only going to register it for use in animals, which is really what SAHPRA has registered it for, but we will use it in humans, and not only for special dispensation, but specifically for COVID-19. And they need the evidence to back that up. Because remember, one thing that they have to do is that they have to protect the population. They must first do no harm. And so if the evidence suggests that there is harm in terms of side effects, or there is not enough, there's not enough evidence to prove that ivermectin actually provides benefits, they're not going to support that. So the evidence that we have so far, the issue is that it is not necessarily compelling. It is still weak evidence. And I know that many people are struggling with what that means. But at the end of the day, I think that it is a scientific exploration at the moment rather than a medical exploration, and the evidence is not necessarily very strong at the moment.
Right. And talk to me then about particularly that limitation only to be used in animals. Is that only applicable in South Africa, or is that the practice everywhere else in the world?
Well, I mean, a lot of in some places it can be used in humans, but even in South Africa it can be used in humans. Like with a special application, you can use it to to treat body lice and so forth. So it's permissible to use as an antiparasitic, but I think it's about this idea of what a drug is purposed for. The ivermectin is not yet purposed for use for COVID-19, not anywhere in the world. I mean, the WHO, the NIH, there's no authority in the world that has, at this point in time, certified it for use for COVID-19.
Now, people who are calling, of course, for this recommendation are saying, give us the freedom of choice to take this drug. Is it as simple as that? Is that how it works? If somebody says, well, look, I want to take the drug, just give me the freedom of choice to act as I please.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. So first of all, the way I try to look at it is that what is it that's making people say those things? At the moment, we understand that people are desperate. And for me, I've been lamenting on the fact that our healthcare system in South Africa is very curative. We want a pill for every ill. We don't deal well with a condition that does not have a specific drug or medication that one can just take and solve their problem. Right now, a lot of us are frustrated with the fact that we have to engage in behavioral interventions and so forth. We just want someone to give us something to take, which is also why we are so desperate for vaccines to come so that the problem can go away. But in itself, that is the benefit of biotechnology and science. Now, there are rules to the way we apply science. If we start bending those rules, we are going down a slippery slope. And it's possible that if we carry on that way, some things we're not going to be able to fix. We're going to set a wrong precedence. And I understand a lot of people calling for this are also health professionals. And as a medical doctor, we know the first thing is first do no harm. And as a medical doctor, I wasn't trained to evaluate the evidence itself. And so it's not enough to basically ask for scientists to overlook the weaknesses in the evidence and ask the authorities to overlook that because we are desperate for a cure, we are desperate for an intervention, we are desperate for a drug. So we need to respect those processes. I think in the future, it's possible that the evidence might favor the use of ivermectin. It may end up being repurposed, but people should not ask for the regulatory authorities or scientists to bend the rules in the processes of science.
Now, should SAPRA be open to consider new and emerging clinical data and to review its stance, how long does that process take? I mean, we have been seeing emergency applications for vaccines.
Exactly.
I mean, would be something of that nature be applicable here?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good example because even in the way that we considered the emergency applications for vaccines, we needed to make sure that the process of science is not necessarily violated. And you will hear a lot of people saying that we don't trust the vaccines because they were produced very quickly. But on the other hand, you're now hearing people saying, no, actually, we don't want this drug to go through the clinical trials and follow the scientific process because we want it now, we want something quickly. I mean, we cannot have it both ways. We need to make sure that we follow those processes because of the importance of what ivermectin could do if indeed is proven to be effective. And we say this because we recognize that there have been so many drugs that have been presented as potentially of benefit in terms of COVID-19. And we are being cautious. We've been through hydroxychloroquine, we've been through remdesivir, we've been through a lot of drugs that we've basically been disappointed when we went for rigorous trials. So even in this case, if the evidence is presented that is compelling, then all authorities in the world, they will have to look at it regardless of where they are. Whether it's developed countries or developing countries.
I was the acting Deputy Vice Chancellor there for Research and Innovation at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Musa Moshabela. Appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us tonight.